Well, look, it's great to see. I've been re-listening, and I listened at the time. It's been a couple of years since, or a year maybe, was it, that Things Fall Apart?
Things fell apart.
Yeah, Things Fall Apart.
Maybe like a year and a half ago. We've just finished season 2, or just about to finish season 2. Okay. It's about to go out. It's very good. Except for people that don't know, it's a BBC show. It's one of those shows I always kind of dread it. Like, so I realised, like, so many of my shows, when I describe them, they sound shit. They sound boring. The only thing I've ever done that sold itself was the psychopath test.
Right.
Turns out people want to buy books with the word psychopath in the title.
And find out if they are one. We'll find out later for me.
Yes.
Look, but it's a. I mean, I love your podcast, and I love the kind of. For me, you're someone who takes sort of podcasts way further than anyone else, and they are. I mean, I know they can go on the radio as well, but they feel like they feel more like podcasts than radio shows as well, which is what I like about them.
Yeah, I think so. I've got quite the work ethic.
Yes.
It's the only. I don't know. I asked Randy Newman once, like, why do you do it? Why do you write songs? And he gave a kind of sad answer, which I've grown into it being my answer.
Okay.
He said it's how I judge myself and how I feel better. so that's why I. What do you do?
Why do I do this? Because there's nothing, once you've gone this far, there's nothing else you can do.
There's nothing else. My son's grown up. I've been married for decades.
I love doing performing. I don't really count the podcast as performing, as you may have noticed in the intro. Yeah. I do. I definitely, because I never got into drugs. I used to drink, but I never got into taking drugs. But I think like performing stand-up is enough of a drug, and so I feel very at home on stage. I'm a very different person on stage.
I think I've got that thing of like it's calming all the horrors of the world by turning them into stories.
Yes.
And being able to control it by just sitting at home, just minutely editing. Yeah. There's just something very comforting about that. Well, I sometimes feel like one of those. There's something kind of something spectrumy about it.
I'm sure.
You get up at 6 a.m. and you're just thinking about every split second of the thing, and then the next thing you know, it's 6 o'clock at night.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's and then time passes, then you die, and then it's over.
Yeah.
That's good. I mean, it's a great series. I think it interests me, that. The stuff you're doing and the reasons you do it and the situations you put yourself in and the things you're discovering. I was watching. It's not a very good Simon Pegg film, but there's a Simon Pegg film about Jeff, the talking mongoose. You know that story on the Isle of Man. In the 1950s, I think it was. There was a there's always a teenage girl usually in the house when these things happen. And there was a talking mongoose called Jeff that lived in the walls and would say things to people and sing. Yeah. It's a really interesting story.
Which of my stories does this remind you of?
But it reminds me of the guy that Simon Pegg plays is a skeptic, but goes to look into this thing. Right. Well, most skeptics would go, well, that girl's a ventriloquist and this is clearly bullshit.
Yeah.
But he wanted to go to find out the definite truth, as if he partly wanted it to be true as well.
Yeah, I like skeptics who are willing to believe.
Yeah.
I tell you who's like that. I don't like the ones who are too rationalist, because there's something a little bit fascistic, to be honest, about overly rationalist skeptics. Yeah. But I tell you who I like, Robbie Williams. He phoned me up during COVID and said... he said he was thinking about like me and him going on an adventure to find out who Q is, like from QAnon, and he said,
would be quite an adventure, wouldn't it?
I thought so. There's been many times that we've nearly had paranormal adventures, me and Robbie.
Right, yes, yeah.
There was one time when he called me up and said that he wanted to spend a night in a haunted house, and could I set one up for him? And so I emailed all these ladies of the manor, saying, dear lady, blah, I read on the internet that if the portrait in your drawing room is moved, a ghost appears. Recently, I have been contacted by the pop star Robbie Williams. And I tell you what, I expected like no one to get back to me. 100%.
Really?
They were throwing their ghosts at Robbie Williams as if they were their debutante daughters. And then he changed his mind and said he didn't want to spend the night in a haunted house.
So you used to look like the kind of mad person who said, I'm friends with Robbie Williams and he wants to look at me.
Right. Yeah, no, I got very grumpy about that. I thought, no wonder Robbie Williams and ghosts get on so well. They both only ever manifest themselves when it suits them. But he phoned me up and he said he was thinking about, solving the QAnon mystery. He said, I'm a skeptic. I've got a foot in both camps. He said, people, I've read on the internet that people think that I am part of Robbie said about himself, that I'm part of the paedophile cabal. Right. And I know that's not true about me, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's not true about Bill Gates. So. Right. Yeah. Paedophile. I had a meeting at This American Life quite recently, and in America, they say pedophile. Yes. So I was at this meeting and I said paedophile, and Ira Glass said, you make it sound so classy.
Good. Well, Things Fell Apart is partly about QAnon there. That's one. There's so many, there's so much work in that series, and I know it sort of does overlap, and that's what's kind of partly amazing about it as well. But it's basically all these different stories. It must be very intensive work to create a series like this. So can I tell you a story from season 2, which is coming out? Similarly, extraordinary. Yeah. So in Miami in the 80s, 32 women were found dead in mysterious circumstances. And they were all black sex workers, and the police just couldn't figure out how they died. There was no signs of death. They were all found in the same position, and low levels of cocaine were found in all of their systems, but they had nothing else in common. So the deputy chief medical examiner declared that he had determined the cause of death. And these women had all spontaneously dropped dead, he said, as a result of a combination of cocaine and sex. Right.
When I told a friend this, she said, well, how come I'm not dead? And he gave it a name. Yeah. And the name was Excited Delirium.
Right.
So anyway, to cut a very long story short, and this is can I ask, if anybody's going to I know no one's on Twitter anymore, but if anybody happens to still be on Twitter, can you just not tweet this?
They'll be good. They're very good, my audience, apart from the occasional journalist scum.
Yeah.
Who's going to agree not to do this?
Anyway, because the whole story is just so amazing, and it will be out in January. Right. Anyway, it turned out that it was a serial killer, of course.
Of course, yeah.
And anyway, this doctor was undaunted, and he carried on going around America, telling everybody about his theory of excited delirium. And excited delirium starts getting taught in police training schools. And guess who learned all about excited delirium and how you have to subdue them because they have superhuman strength. Because women die because of a combination of cocaine and sex, and men just go crazy. They rip off their clothes, they run through traffic, and you have to subdue them. And who learned all about excited delirium? This complete, bogus bullshit diagnosis. Derek Chauvin, who then went on to murder George Floyd, and as they stood around George Floyd's body, they discussed excited delirium. Wow. This diagnosis that is... I'm so interested in pseudoscience in high places. People like us sometimes, it's easy to make fun of, backwards Christians and rednecks, but the fact is, pseudoscience and magical thinking exists in the highest places. It's what my book, The Many Stare at Goats, was about how, military leaders thought that they could walk through walls and kill goats just by staring at them. Yeah. I met a colonel in the military who was part of a secret unit called Project Jedi. Right. And I asked him. He said Project Jedi was a series of levels. And I said, what was level 1? He said, level 1 is observation. You walk into a room how many chairs are in the room, the super soldier would just know. So I said, what was level 2? He said, level 2 was intuition. You're at a fork in the road. Do you go left? Do you go right? You go right. And I said, what was level 3? This was like the easiest interview I've ever done. I said, what was level 3? He said, level 3 was invisibility. And I said, so that's kind of a leap from that. I said, well, actual invisibility? And he said, at first, but after a while we adapted it to trying to find ways of not being seen. And I said, like camouflage? And he went, no. And then he said, level 4 was we had a master sergeant that could stop the heart of a goat just by wanting it to stop. And I said, did he ever manage it? And he said, one time, but his heart got damaged in the process. And I said, what, was the goat psychically fighting back? And he said, no, the goat didn't stand a chance. Yeah, in paranormal circles, it's called sympathetic injury. Anyway, I was watching that footage. I filmed that in Hawaii in like pretty much 20 years ago, 2004. 2003, and I was watching the footage, and my wife came home, and I said, "Look at this," and she was a bit drunk, and she said, "Oh, you should call it The Men Who Stare at Goats."
Right.
Yeah, and then years later, when they turned it into a movie, they told me that it was the title, The Men Who Stare at Goats, that made them want to do the movie.
Wow.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you,
And
Elaine.
when I did Celebrity Pointless, they did books with animals in the title. And Robert Lindsay's daughter got the go before me and said that, so I couldn't do it. So I had to guess the title of a Dr. Seuss book instead. I got that right then.